All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Village Project. And before I get started with my special guest, I wanted to talk about the pillars of the Village Project. In the Village Project, we focus on having a solution-oriented mindset. We're about seeing the change, being the change, and building the future. And some of the things that we do, we practice in order to keep that solution-oriented mindset is we reframe problems as challenges, we take responsibility, we ask the right questions, we maintain a positive attitude, and we commit to continuous learning. We rely heavily on the power of community, and we also rely on effective mentoring. But I really am anxious to kind of jump into this conversation because I have a really strong guest, a really good friend of mine. She's a mother and she's a teacher of 23 years in the Lancaster School District. Did I get that right? Is it 23 years?
Yes.
Okay. And she's been my friend for 20 plus years. And I don't know if you remember in my first podcast, I stated how I had the privilege of working with some very strong professionals, some that were very strong academically, and others that were experts in building rapport, like myself. Well, Nicole is both. And she's one of the few people that I've always trusted enough to go to for help. And so I'm really excited to have her on this episode of the Village Project, where we talk about raising successful children takes a strong community, but we don't focus so much on the children. We focus more on supporting and mentoring the parents. And I'm sure that not only will parents get a lot out of today's meeting, but teachers as well. So, how you doing, Nicole?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
All right. You just got off work. How was your week?
It was a good week. It was fun. We had a great time with lots of warm weather and it's kind of easing in after spring break, right before state testing. So it's a little anxious time this week.
Get, get, hear me and
Yep.
really we you got me now? Okay. So, you know, I did want to start with what has led you to teaching?
Oh gosh, ever since I was in third grade, I
Uh,
wanted to be a teacher. I enjoyed being around kids. Babysitting was something I enjoyed. Working at my church was something I enjoyed with the little itty bitties. And so I fostered that throughout. And for some reason, since third grade, I always just was like, I'm going to be a teacher. And then in high school, I went to Palmdale High School and I had the ability to be in a medical program there and I fell in love with it. And so I was pursuing medicine. And my sophomore year in college, I had to make a list. And the list was what were my pros and cons in teaching versus being in medicine. And so you all know what happened since I'm a teacher, but my list for pros for the teachers outweighed my pros for working in medicine.
for sharing that. And so can you tell us a little bit about you were just talking about that list of pros and cons. Who helped you with that?
My dad,
Okay.
my father and I have a very close relationship, and I came to him and expressed my thoughts, and he said, "I encourage you to make a list. Go make a list, and then come back to me, and let's have a conversation about what you wrote down." And I said, "Okay." So I went and made a list and came back, and he read the list back to me and asked me, "What did I think?" And I said, "Well, According to how you've read it to me, it sounds like I need to pursue teaching. And he said, I would agree with you.
Just really kind of made an impact on the choice that you made.
He
Yes.
did. Yes,
Okay. Wow. It sounds like are you still having difficulties hearing me?
a little bit.
Okay. All right. So tell me just a little bit about your childhood and your parents.
Oh gosh, I grew up in a very strict household.
Mhm.
It was religious. It was a Christian home, but it was you do what I say and don't ask questions. It was when I tell you to do something, you do it, and if you don't like it, too bad. So it was there was still turmoil. There was your typical family dynamics. Um, I was the oldest, so I took the blame for a lot of the things that my younger sisters did. So it was definitely an interesting dynamic. My parents had their struggles. They definitely showed me right and wrong ways of how I would pursue being a parent, which I'm thankful for now because I got to see and experience that at the time. Definitely as a 13, 14, 15-year old, not something I would ever recommend, but it shaped who I am. And I'm thankful for that. I am thankful for the things that they provided for me and finances, having my dad with his job. Those were all things that we struggled with. And so I got to experience that throughout my childhood.
Let's translate to parenting.
Can you say that again?
You think to parenting.
Oh, for me, that has watching my parents and all that they did, there was, like I said before, there were some things that I was absolutely, this is what I want to do as a parent. And then there were other things that I said, absolutely, I'm not going to do as a parent. And I think that's a generational thing. I think there's a lot of things that come with generations, and my parents, they grew up with their parents. Basically, this is how things are. This is how we run things. Very tight ship. I don't run my household like that. I have high expectations of my son. He knows those expectations. We talk about them, and if he makes mistakes, we discuss those. And if I make mistakes, we discuss those. So it's a two-way, but he definitely understands the boundaries that mom has set into place, and he's able to acknowledge those and also question those from time to time.
Now that we're talking about parenting habits and strategies, I have a few that you kind of spoke to me about before. So I'm just going to list them, and then I want you to just kind of expound on each one. First, you talked about the importance of listening.
Yes, I think this has come more from being a teacher and being
Mhm.
around so many middle school students and understanding, like, they've really taught me the essence of listening. I didn't grow up with that. It was, again, you do what I say when I say it. And listening to students, they have a voice. It's amazing to me. And I started to realize that my thoughts of what they were going to say, it was always wrong. So I was able to take that listening piece and actually apply it to me as a parent. I became a parent a little bit later in life. And so I was able to do that. And it really has helped me because I'm able to hear what my child has to say, and obviously my students, and take that and process it and then figure out the right solution if a solution is needed, or if students want to elaborate on that. My son wants to elaborate on that, but it allows me to just kind of be in the moment instead of flying through thinking I know best.
One of the things that you mentioned that I really liked was when you said that you raised him to ask questions in a respectful way.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I I want him to be able to stand on his own 2 feet and address adults in a respectful and ultimately a professional manner. We talk about how you're going to have a job someday, whether you're the boss or you have a boss. You need to know how to communicate with people. And so, from a very young age, I had him ask questions. If you don't know, it's okay to ask me why. Now, sometimes the answer was because I said so. However, a lot of times I would expand on that so he understood that there are maybe dangers or there are reasons behind why. It could be cultural reasons, it could be religious reasons. There were reasons as to why I was giving him an answer that I gave him that maybe he just didn't understand and needed more clarification.
Was just thinking, as a teacher, and I'm sure that all the teachers that will hear this will agree with me, how easier life would be if the students in general were comfortable with asking questions in a respectful way. It's a very good tool. So, um, what about you said if he's too angry to be respectful, home is a safe place.
Yes. And I've seen that this year now that he's a freshman. There was a situation that happened at school. And instead of being disrespectful and yelling at the teacher, taking it out on the teacher, he contacted me once he got home and he expressed his concern. Typically, I don't respond to him in my daytime, but I could tell that it was something that was needed. And so we had a long conversation, and that allowed me to then give him that space just to kind of be angry. And then once he got that anger out, I was able to say, okay, what can we do moving forward? How can I support you in this specific situation? 9 times out of 10, he just needed to get it out. And once he got it out, he's like, Mom, I'm fine. I just needed a safe space. But that was something that we've created since he was little to be able to come in the house and know that this is a safe place to just let it out. And then we can figure out a solution if we need one.
Yes. When you first told me that, I remember asking, what happens when he's at home, but he's too angry to be respectful? Do you
Yes.
remember what you said?
Yes. I said that I seek out additional support. There was a period of time where the anger in the household was a little too much, and so I looked to an outside source. We got him some therapy and some counseling, and that was a safe place for him to be able to express something that was going on in the home or express why he was so angry, and then his dad and I were able to come in afterwards and have a conversation with the therapist since he was so young. He was only 8, and discuss those things. What can we do as parents? How can we adjust our parenting styles to meet the needs of our child? There's no handbook to tell you how your kid's going to be, and so I love reaching out to other people to be able to say, "Hey, I need support. He needs support. How can we get this so that we can be back on track and do things in a respectful manner?"
When you first told me that, one of the things that you said to me that I thought was insightful was you said you were teaching him the value of an outside source of help. Yeah. So did you get that?
Yes, and
Okay.
the not just a therapist, but there have been several other mentors that he has been able to tap into when things are not going right in his world and when things are going right in his world. He uses the church as a huge resource for him, whether it is his youth pastor, whether it is an intern that's working in the youth group. He has his parents' friends that he is able to contact and say, hey, this is what's going on. What do you think? And so I really push him to say, hey, it takes a village, it takes a community. It's not just mom that's going to be there to support you. And so I want him to understand that there are other people because he's going to go through different stages of life that maybe he doesn't want to come and talk to me about things, but here are some resources for you, whether they're teachers, whether they're parents, friends. It's all of those things I think are super helpful.
As you're talking, I'm thinking how valuable this would not only be for students, but for parents as well who are struggling. Some of the things that you're talking about. Another strategy that you practiced with him was you said you allowed and taught him to be his own advocate.
Yes. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of times adults will address me as the parent instead of addressing him as the person that they're asking questions to. And so I will then ask him, "Hey, what do you think about this, Dylan?" And so that gives him an opportunity to express his thoughts instead of it just coming from mom and me interpreting his thoughts to somebody else. And so I value that because I want him to feel like he has a voice and that I'm just not masking or overstepping my boundaries and saying things that perhaps maybe, mom, don't say that. But that gives him the opportunity and it makes him feel empowered, which then allows for that conversation to have a conversation with an adult and a respectful conversation. How do you talk to people? Communication is key.
You know, after you have encouraged him to do that, has there ever been a time where he kind of hesitated?
He does hesitate. So it depends. Like, for example, if we go to the doctor's office, sometimes that makes him nervous to have to say something to the doctor, like "Mom, you talk," or sometimes if it's a teacher that maybe he's not doing well in, and I'm like, "It's okay. We're here to support you. But if we don't know what's going on, we can't help you. We can assume, but that doesn't help you as a person."
Specifically, what you said here when you said give him a deadline to talk to his teacher and include you in the communication thread. So very good. The last thing you wrote here was whenever you've made a mistake, you didn't hesitate to apologize.
I make a lot of mistakes. As I
Mhm.
said earlier, there's no book to explain how to parent your
Yeah.
child, and so you learn as you go. And there are
Mhm.
times when I make mistakes, whether I assume something or I'm just having a rough day and I come unhinged, and I'll have to turn around and apologize. However, in doing so, that allows him to know that, hey, mom was a little bit hot today, but she apologized. And I've had that same response returned back to me when he's been angry with me or he's been upset with me and he's kind of just doing his teenage boy thing. And then later he'll come back and he'll say, "Mom, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that, but this is what's going on." So again, it's creating that safe space for him to feel like he can. And it's hard. Sometimes I take it personal, but I have to remember that he's got emotions and feelings too. And it's not just a one-sided thing.
Some of this insight when I was parenting, you know. But do you feel overall, now we're talking about your teaching. Do you feel that you have been impactful over the years in the lives of your students?
Yes. So it's
Okay.
interesting that you asked that question. I just had a student this week write an essay of a teacher who's been inspirational to her, and she
Mhm.
sent it to me to proofread. And so I got that yesterday, and it was just lovely to see that there are students who are so willing to take risks and just say, "Thank you for being somebody," and you don't even realize you're that person.
Official student, Kendra Kelly. Tell us about her. And while you're talking about her, I'm going to share a picture of her.
Okay. So Kendra Kelly she will be 29 this month. And I was given the opportunity to come alongside her at the age of 12. She was in sixth grade going into seventh grade. And her sixth grade teacher asked me if I would be able to come alongside her and support her in the AVID program, which is a college prep program. I said, absolutely. So I took on that challenge, for a better lack of words, and was able to just come alongside her and support her in her personal life as well as her academic life. And I'm going to tell you, she did not care for me for the first year. She actually hated me. And that's only because I held her to a higher standard. And she'll tell you that now. And she's thankful for that. And she's thankful for the time that I put in, from everywhere, from going to her volleyball games, her track meets, going to her um, her school functions, going to graduations. I was there when she graduated boot camp. I went out and saw her. She's on leave right now, but she is going to be traveling out to go do some drill sergeant stuff and become a drill sergeant. So she'll be graduating from that soon as well. So I look forward to going out and watching her graduate and continuing her endeavors through the military.
So I noticed that, and you may have touched on this a little bit, but it was a sort of a rough start with her, right? Did you talk about that?
It was. She had a rough childhood, and so
Uh-huh.
she she was a little bit trying to navigate, as most middle school students do. They're just trying to navigate who they are, what's going on, how can we please our parents, how can we have friendships. They're in between that elementary and high school adult age. And so she really did have a rough start. And having an adult figure there for her, not that her parents weren't, but an additional support. So when she was at school, she felt like she was being supported was key. She then felt like, okay, I can come to school and I have an additional adult or two. There was more than just me there to support her in the emotional times when she was having a rough time. It's okay to come talk to me. It's okay to say, hey, this is where I feel safe. This is my safe space. So just bringing in the outside to the inside, the community from home into school.
So what are some of the teaching habits and strategies that you practice now and have practiced?
The one thing that is most beneficial is getting to know my students' names. I give myself a goal the first 2 weeks of school to learn all somewhere between 150 and 200 of my students' names. Everybody has a name and it's pronounced different or it's pronounced similar to other people's. And I want to make sure that I know who they are because there's value in somebody knowing your name. And so for me, that's just something that goes a long way. And if I don't remember your name, I do my best to write it down to practice it. And I tell students, I'm going to practice this. If I get it wrong, tell me because I think it's important that I know who you are and what your name means.
And for me as well. And even when I became an ISI teacher and I dealt with the entire public, the entire population, I still made it a point to really know the kids' names because it had more impact when you can call them out by name and they knew you cared enough just because you knew their name, you know. So very good. What about taking a genuine interest in their family and culture?
So at the school I'm teaching at and the schools I've taught at in
Mhm.
Lancaster School District, we have a variety of different cultures and backgrounds, and people come with different families, blended and single families, just everything. And so for me, when I take an interest in a student's family or their background, it allows for me to just have a more personal relationship with those students because again, they see that I care. It's beyond just them. I genuinely want to know who they are. And so it's fun for me to start my class periods with good things and they get to share something good that happened. Or if we come back from a vacation, hey, what did you do? Tell me one good thing that you did on your vacation, even if it was just being able to sleep in. I want to know. And that sparks their interest in wanting to share. Oh, we visited family. Oh, well, where did you go? And so that just allows me to explore a little bit, to hear about them. It allows them to share with me what they feel comfortable sharing with me.
Making children feel safe in your class. I know there's usually a child that doesn't fit in anywhere. And how do you go about making a child like that feel safe in your class?
I, it really just it starts with the greeting that I have at the door. I either do a handshake with a greeting, I do a fist bump with a greeting, and so sometimes I'll ask students who I see that might be struggling, good morning or good afternoon, how are you doing? If I see that a kid is having a rough time, I might call them out of class and just have a one-on-one. Is there something that you need? My environment in my classroom, I like to make it more um, homey feeling with plants, coffee tables in the center of the room, so that kids come into a space that doesn't just feel like it's just four walls and they're there just to learn. I truly want them to understand that I'm there to not just teach them about academia, but to teach them about social emotional learning. How to be an adult. That's something that I think is important. And so if they feel safe, then they're going to learn.
You actually teaching them the type of people that they should be when they get older. And one of the statements you made when I was talking to you about this earlier was you said that even though we're all different in my classroom, we're a family, you know?
Yes.
Yes. So very good. The last thing you wrote down as one of your strategies and habits is that you learn from the students.
Every day. I tell the students, I said, please don't be afraid if I've made a mistake, if I've spelled something wrong, if you think that maybe I said something and meant something else, call me out on it. That's okay to say, hey, Miss Reed, did you actually mean this? Or Miss Reed, you might have spelled this wrong, because that allows me to stop and be educated. And just because I'm an adult doesn't mean that I stop learning. I learn all the time from my students, and I tell them, you guys have the world at your fingertips. I didn't have that growing up. We had encyclopedias. They were at our fingertips, but it took a while to get the information. So you guys have a lot more in your brain, and I want to hear about it. So I tell them, teach me. Don't be afraid to do so.
It never ends. It just makes life that much more fun when you see everything as an opportunity to learn. It really makes you value the people you're around because you're always looking for an opportunity to learn from them, and I think they can feel that, you know. Um, ultimately what the Village Project is about is we're really about mentoring and supporting parents because and I've taught for over 20 years. And I feel like at the school, we're doing all that we can to help the students, but still there seems to be a lack of some sort. So I've really um, made my focus on what's going on at home. And I really want to focus on the parents of students that are struggling because not all parents have struggling students. But those parents that do have students that are struggling, I think they could use some support and they could use some help and maybe a little bit of mentoring. So, my last question to you is what suggestions would you give to parents who have students that are struggling in school? And, one of the very first things you wrote one of the things that you practice is listening. And do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So I have learned over the years that students just want to be heard. And relating that back to my own child, often I will say, hey, can you help me understand why? And then fill in the blank. And that's a phrase that I use often is help me understand why. Instead of coming across and saying, why did you do this? It's more of a help me understand why you did this because I don't know your rationale. I don't understand. And so that gives them an opportunity to explain and me an opportunity to listen. And then when I'm listening, I get to then be engaged and say, hey, do you need a response from me? Or is this just a time for me to sit and listen because you just want my attention to be heard?
Also said everything doesn't require a response. Does that only apply to older kids or does that apply to any age? What?
Personally, I think that applies to any age
Uh-huh.
um, because sometimes I don't need to voice my opinion. And that's a hard one for me as a parent I always want to be, because I'm a teacher and I'm a mom, I want to just constantly give you advice. And I have to really stop myself and have to tell myself, Nicole, this is not your turn. You just let him or let whoever in the classroom talk. Let them talk. Just be an ear to listen. And maybe later you can come and say, hey, we have this conversation. Did you figure it out? What's going on? And then that way you can come back to it when they're in a better spot and you can address it. And it might be a better time for words of wisdom or another conversation to be had. So I really, those two really go hand in hand. And it's one of those things that over the years I truly, truly struggle with. And so it's been something that I've had to overcome with the listening piece. And then shut up, Nicole, don't say anything. It's not your time.
Um, One of the things that we kind of talked about together was getting up early in the morning to decrease the amount of before school chaos. And then
Yes.
you told me about a practice that you and your son have.
Yes, he actually still likes it when I go in and say good morning and wake him up. So I have a benefit there that he does enjoy that. However, there are times where he's exhausted and he'll say, "Hey, mom, can I just have 10 more minutes?" And my response to him is I put it back on him and I say, "Okay, you need to set an alarm." And I'll ask him, "Did you set an alarm?" And so he knows that that's when he needs to get up. I do call him later on my way to work and say, "Okay, make sure that he's up." We have a conversation and he's out the door. But me getting up in time to get myself going to make sure that he gets himself going is something that I've done since he was in kindergarten, even before then, because he went to daycare while I went to work. And so we've always established these routines that he has breakfast, that he, gets dressed, that he brushes his teeth. If you have morning chores, these are things you need to do ahead of time. He doesn't like doing homework in the evening. He likes to do homework in the morning. And so that was something new for me as a parent because I was always told I had to come home and do homework as a child. So he prefers to do it. And so he gets up a little bit earlier just so that he can get some homework accomplished in the morning when he's fresh and he has a clearer mind.
Really, you said reach out to teachers more, especially to the ones in whose class your child is struggling.
Yes, and I don't just say that as a teacher. I have
Uh-huh.
to say that as a parent, I have had to reach out to some teachers, and have said, "Hey, I see that my child isn't doing well. What is the problem? You are at school with him. Is it his cell phone? Is it him sleeping? What's going on so that I can assist him at home and I can be connected so that my child knows that, hey, I can't get away with these things at school. My mom's going to contact my teachers." And so that's allowed me to bridge that gap and just have an open conversation with his teachers. But I do give him the opportunity to address those concerns first before. So we have a conversation prior to me doing that. And it's like, "Hey, if you can't get this figured out, I will step in as your parent." So you have an opportunity. I give him a timeline. This is how much time I expect. If it's not done, then I'm going to come in and I'm going to talk to teachers.
I knew going into this conversation, Nicole, that it would be rich in content and strategies. And I mean, you're just a great person. You always have been. Just to kind of touch on the three pillars of the Village Project again, is first of all, the solution-oriented mindset. I want to say something. People like you are the solution, you know? And the second pillar is community, the power of community. We have everything we need right here in the AV to make the AV a better place. Now, technically, you don't live in the AV, but I consider you a member because you've been teaching in the AV. You've been teaching up here for over 20 years. But where there's a Nicole, there's an Amy, there's a Jonelle. Where there's a Michael, there's a Chris and there's a Sean. There's a bunch of us, and we all have something to contribute. Not just teachers, but parents as well. And then the final piece is mentoring. When there's a saying that says you're only as strong as the weakest link. So in our community, if we have some weak links, I think it's all of our responsibility to help. And the way I look at mentoring is leading parents, lifting youth, and lighting the way. So I would love to get some of these parents who are struggling with their students and have a real conversation with them, no judgment on what they don't know, and then walking it out with them, you know. And I'm glad that I have you as a source of somebody that I can always come to for advice, Nicole. And I'm hoping that when other teachers see this conversation, that they would want to participate in this as well. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
So
me too.
yes. So I got to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know there was a little technical difficulties, but overall, I think it went really well. You know,
Yes, thank you for having me.
I appreciate you for coming. Thank you. So, everyone, thank you for joining us on the Village Project, where we are empowering the parents to be the change that their children need. All right. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.